This episode is brought to you by the CityCX newsletter, a new tool for strategies and a guide for cities to connect better with residents. Subscribe now at citycx.info. Oh, hi, I'm Dana Birchman. Welcome to Oh Hi Stories. Today's episode goes beyond strategy and straight to the heart. My guest is Sherice Torres, a trailblazing marketing executive who's led global brands like Google through transformation, launched game-changing innovations in tech and entertainment, and delivered billions in annual revenue through customer-first storytelling. She's a chief marketing officer, a mom, and a woman who knows how to turn bold ideas into results that matter. But this conversation isn't just about career wins. It's about what happens after the climb. Sherice recently stepped away from a high-powered executive role to take what she calls a radical sabbatical, a pause, not to plan her next title, but to rediscover who she is without one. We talk about burnout, the myth of doing it all, the power of letting go, and the joy of rebuilding a life aligned with your deepest values. I share more of my own story in this episode than I ever have before, and I hope you'll see yourself in both of our journeys. Sherice, thank you so much for joining me today. It is such an honor to have you as a guest, and you are truly someone who I admire as a woman, an entrepreneur, a mother, a leader. I was fortunate enough to cross paths with you, more than 15 years ago in the Viacom world, and you got to work with my amazing husband, and I became a super fan of you, who at the time, I know he was so inspired and moved in his career by working for someone like you, and still to this day talks about what an incredible boss, leader, mentor you are and continue to be, even, more than a decade later. And so I'm just really honored to get to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, Dana, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure watching your career and Scott's career over the years and building a friendship from afar. So excited to be here today.
Oh, well, thank you. And right now I know you've just returned from doing some self-exploring, and you're in this incredible moment in your career and life. I think both of us as mothers with children preparing to go to college and go away. We're in this really interesting time of our lives and careers. And you recently started on a new journey in 2025. Obviously, you've held huge, chief marketing officer for some huge corporations and businesses. And now you're taking some time on what you call a radical sabbatical to take care of yourself and think about what this next stage of your life looks like. And I'd love to know about that and what inspired you to really pause and reflect to figure out what this next phase looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting story. So end of last year, my last role came to an end. Like so many companies, I was CMO at a company in the electric vehicle charging space, and we were going through some financial challenges. And the entire executive team was given a task in terms of layoffs and cutbacks of our budgets. And once I went through the task I was given, the CEO and I had a conversation. And I said, hey, I love this job. I need this job. But when I think about what the company needs at this phase in its life cycle and what is best for the department, we would be better served by keeping a number of more junior marketers here than having a CMO. I'd love to stay. I'd love to come back if I have that opportunity, but this is what's right for the company. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I was kicking myself because I was like, what are you thinking? You have senior in high school. He's about to graduate, go to college. You have a sophomore. You are the primary breadwinner in your home. You don't sacrifice yourself on the altar of layoffs. And when they took me up on that offer, I was equal parts relieved and terrified. I was relieved because I knew I needed something different. I was terrified because I'd never experienced something like this before. So the end of the year was really a grieving process for me, grieving the job that I'd left, the identity that I built up over almost 30 years. And then in January, I went to a workshop. There was a group called Modern Elder Academy. Chip Conley, Christine Sperber, and Jeff Hamui are the co-founders of MEA. And I'd heard about them for the past 7 years. The group's about 7 years old, and I'd admired them from afar. But I went onto their website and there was a navigating transitions workshop. And I said, that's exactly what I need. I'm going to go to this thing. I'll go to the high desert in Santa Fe, and I will either write a business plan or I'll write out the requirements for what my next job is. I was going in with a plan, figure out what's next. What came through loud and clear was, honey, you need a break. I had not taken more than 2 weeks off, with the exceptions of medical leaves, which we all know, maternity leave or other, that is not a break. So I'd not taken more than 2 weeks off since 1995. Let's just pause and think about that. 1995 to 2025. And I'd only taken 2 weeks off because that was the cycle I was in. That was the cycle that a lot of corporate roles or traditional roles keeps you running it. So when I went to MEA, every message I got was shifting from what's your next career, what's your next role, to who am I now? What's important to me now? What lights me up now? And I knew that's not something I could determine in a 6-day retreat, in a week-long workshop. So at the end of each session, the MEA compadres, you call your classmates compadres, you're on a journey of creation together. At the end, the commitment I made to my compadres was to take a minimum of a 6-month sabbatical to really radically reclaim my joy. And that's where I am. And I've hit the halfway mark.
And so how is it? Tell me what you have discovered. I love that. Radically reclaim my joy. And I can so relate to this because I left voluntarily a job that I had built and created and was passionate about for 12 years to take a risk and try to build something on my own. And also to try to be sure that I wasn't missing out on these precious high school years and junior high years of my daughters before they leave. And also to get my voice back again and find out, reclaim who I was. And one thing I definitely did was jump into it very quickly. And in hindsight, I look back and think, it might not have been a bad idea to take a little bit of time to do exactly what you're talking about. But as women, we don't stop to do that, to take the time for ourselves or think we have permission to do that. And I said when I left that job after corporate world and then that, I hadn't also, same as you, taken 2 weeks off since our wedding and honeymoon combined. But other than that, I started a job with a 10-week-old and a 2-year-old, moved from New York after the first baby. And it was just like run. And so I can so relate to this. So tell me what you've learned in these 3 months again about finding this joy. And it's also really hard, I think, for people like you and I who are so used to running so fast to be still. What advice do you have for people like me or others who are wanting to do the same thing as you are before we're just burn out to no end?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. First, make some guidelines for your time. I wrote about this in my LinkedIn updates and also on Medium. I write a post called Project Lotus. That's what I've branded my radical sabbatical because, I'm a marketer. I'm going to brand it. And one of the first things that I did was follow the advice of my dear friend, Daisy Auger Dominguez. Daisy actually recently published a book called Burnt Out to Lit Up. And she outlined what she called the year of my heart. After she left a role, she took a year to really rediscover what she wanted next and deeply connect with her family. And the first thing she did was to set some guidelines. And being a rule follower, being a person who likes order, I knew I needed structure to my days. I was literally going from back-to-back 25-minute meetings from some days 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. Pacific, to having full stretches of unscheduled days in front of me. So I had kind of 3 rules that I set up for myself. First, I wanted to have no more than 3 scheduled events per day. I did that because I knew if left to my own devices, I would fall back into old habits and fill every waking hour with an activity, with networking, with some type of certification or class. And part of this time really was to rest. It wasn't the whole time, but I was extremely burnt out. So I said no more than 3 activities per day. Obviously, if you have a family emergency or something, necessary for your health, of course, that will bump other things, but no more than 3 scheduled activities, number 1. Number 2, I wanted to do something creative every day. The first aha moment after I began this sabbatical was I no longer had hobbies. I was very 1 or 2 dimensional in my personality. I would go to work. If I was at home, I'd have dinner with my family. Then I'd go back to the second shift, go to sleep, and start over the next day. Lather, rinse, repeat. And other than occasionally reading books on weekends or over vacation, that's all that I did. And I realized I was missing connection. I wasn't making deliberate time to go on walks with a girlfriend or schedule a Zoom coffee chat with a colleague from business school. I had lost so many of the things that brought me joy and fulfillment in my life prior. So I decided I needed to do something creative just for me every day. I'm going to pause there for a minute because even that was an adventure. I started by making Lego flowers. So if you see behind me, I have my Lego orchid here, and I have, I have a little bonsai plant and cherry blossoms. Even that, the first time I was making the Lego cherry blossoms, I freaked out because there were no words on the directions. It's just images. It makes sense if you think about it because it's often kids. But I froze and initially asked my 16-year-old Victor, here, help me. Can you do this? And he's like, Mom, this is supposed to be your thing. And the big discovery I had was I had a massive fear of failure. I couldn't even take a risk of following the wrong step, putting together a Lego cherry blossom. And so I then journaled about that. What is behind this? What is this fear? What do I think is going to happen if I make a mistake? And that really uncovered so much for me. And then my third rule for Project Lotus was if it didn't fit into one of 3 categories, I wasn't going to do it. And every day, those categories were peace, play, and pleasure. So in addition to not scheduling more than 3 things a day, if it didn't fall into one of those 3 categories, I wasn't doing it. So
wow.
Let me pause there. You asked kind of how I shaped the time and what my advice was. That's how I shaped my time. But my main advice for anyone thinking about this is it's not easy. If you think, oh, I'm going to go into a sabbatical and I'll get lots of rest and it'll be fantastic, it's really a roller coaster. Some days I enjoyed the rest. I took the walk. I was very deeply introspective. Other days I was like, oh my God, what are you thinking? You're going to lose everything. You're going to become irrelevant in your industry. Someone's going to see this career break and it's going to ruin your chances for your next job. I wish I could say I was true to my commitment and never applied to jobs. That would be a lie. On the days where I have to have a job, I have to provide for my family, I would troll LinkedIn and I'd apply for lots and lots of things. And then I would pause and my prayer, my meditation would be, if this role isn't for me, please don't let me get it. And what usually would be bad news, not getting a role or not getting a call back, became good news because I wasn't getting the calls. I went through an interview process or 2 late last year before I committed to the sabbatical. And I had the same prayer. I said, please, if this role isn't for me, don't let me take it. Because if I get the job, I'm going to take it. And those 2 jobs did not work out. They're wonderful companies, wonderful opportunities, but it's not what I needed in that moment. So my biggest piece of advice for women, for anyone thinking about taking a career sabbatical or just any break, is make it work for you. Set up the guidelines that will set you up for success and give you some structure to your days, because we're so accustomed to structure, and roll with it. You are going to freak out. 100% guaranteed. Every day is going to be different, but don't think that it's a mistake. Set your guidelines, know what you can afford, how long you can afford to step back, and just roll with the emotions, because it is a big change from how people like you and I have navigated our careers.
Completely. I can so relate to everything you're saying. And I've had the same moments. I'm like, forget this. I'm just applying for the job, and you get this moment of desperation. But then in those moments of clarity, when you ask yourself, is that really the right job for me? Is that the next step? Is this something? And I think building something is really scary. And for me, I've always been a part of a bigger team and leading a team. I know you're the same way.
Yep.
And this has been so solitary in the sense of consulting with clients and kind of coming in and out as an advisor. And then in some ways, relief of they can either implement my ideas or not my problem. But then I miss that control of like, wait, no, I make things happen. Like I make it come to life. And so it's been really hard. And I think I hit the 6-month mark and I said, I can't do this, whatever. And my husband said, it's only been 6 months and you have a client, you've built your business, you've launched, you have a website, you have a podcast. Go easy on yourself, But I think for us, people who we're so defined, and you're someone who, went to Harvard, and I read a Forbes article recently about you, and you were talking about how the people who doubted that you could get into Harvard, you mailed them your acceptance letter, your teachers. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. So you are someone, and like me, I think, now I did not go to Harvard, but who has it's in our DNA. It is ingrained in the type of people we are, the mothers we are, the spouses we are, the workers. I get it. Wearing all those hats as, it defines who we are. And for me, my work has always been such a primary pillar of who I am. And I think I've really struggled in wearing the mom hat, of like, oh God, maybe I'm not as good at this. And is there really going to be this expectation that I got to go to everything? How can we find that balance of being able to do it all and do it all well? And then I think when we do, we burn out. And I've experienced that. And I know you have too. So talk to me about, for people that have this in our DNA, right? How have you, I love how you talk about not being so hard on yourself and giving yourself these parameters and guidelines. And how does that self-talk work in your head, in your mind, so that you don't take that wrong job, right? Because it's easy to do. It's easy to fall back to that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. So another big piece of the workshop I went to last week was really refining my definition of success right now, and refining what elements of the role, any role, whether it's me doing something entrepreneurially, going back into a large organization, taking a role in a smaller organization. What am I good at and what lights me up? Because just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean it's something you enjoy. And let's be honest, I'd love to say that you can find the perfect job that's only what you like and not what you don't. That's not going to happen. However, if we're not deliberate about what is my zone of genius, right? What's that intersection of my skill and my interest level, and how much of this role meets those parameters? So I took a lot of time listing out my personal values and my professional values. And what was interesting to me is when I listed them out, or what my professional values had been, or what I thought my professional values were. What I found is there wasn't a lot of overlap. In professional values, or the things that I prioritized in my career to date, I saw a lot of things like career advancement, being the best, financial security, innovation and inspiration, leading teams. I had authenticity and empathy and compassion in there because they're the core of who I am. But when I looked at my personal attributes, a lot of those things I associate with striving, being the best, making the climb, they weren't there. It was really about, how do I show up as a person? How do I build community? How do I help build the next generation, whether it be my children, my nephews and nieces, my cousins, or the future leaders that I mentor? Then I took a step deeper and I realized, when I was at the peak of my career, and I don't just mean title, when I was feeling fully in my power, feeling fully integrated in my role, my personal values aligned 100% with how I showed up at work. When I felt disempowered, or when I was shrinking myself, and I'd love to talk about that, I think that's been part of both of our journeys,
Yes.
is when I was making a trade-off on my personal values, either to fit in to a culture that did not work for me, or to advance my career because it's what I thought I should do. Success for me was always getting to the next level as quickly as possible, right? You go to the best school that you're admitted to. You take the bold-faced name job, and you always want to go up and to the right. Well, I've climbed that mountaintop. I got to the C-suite, and there are times that I loved it, and I was able to be in my integrity, in my power. And there are times when I thought, is this all that there is? Did I give away so much of my life and my life force just for this title? And I really am considering what success looks like moving forward. I feel like I might have lost the thread on your initial question, but that's really what I've been thinking about lately.
No, I love it. I love it. Two things there. I remember Michelle Obama talking about that, getting to the point where you're like in these room with the smartest people, and you're in the White House and you have everyone coming and you're like, and this is it? They're not really any different. And so I think in that you have discovered something about the chase that it isn't fulfilling. I do want to talk about the shrinking yourself, because I think this is something that we really, especially when we're raising our children too, and they're always watching. I had been in a situation where I was, what you said, completely out of alignment with my personal values and my professional values. For almost a decade, they were aligned. And like you, I was in my joy and power, and then they weren't. And I held on, and I tried to think that it would change, but I became very quiet. I really lost my voice, which, as you know, we talk about with marketing and being marketers, the personal brand, the speaking, doing this, having these conversations is such a critical part of that. And I was so lost in just kind of like surviving and hanging on. And plus it was post-COVID world where everything was changing, and you're also second guessing things because we did have time then to reevaluate. I think for someone like me, being home was like, I've been sitting in office for 12 hours a day and in my car, and what am I doing? I can do my job at home and be here. I mean, that was a crazy epiphany for me too. But then it almost seemed like, again, back to this idea of this pendulum, it swung back, and it was like, in the government space especially, now come back to the office, and things were never the same, and they were never going to be the same because the world was different. And I felt, I had restraining orders, and I wasn't safe in my workplace, and I was followed home, and I had my children's school was targeted, and I just held on. And it was like, oh, no, I won't let them win. At the detriment of, losing myself, my values to play along or fall in line and play that game. And
you said something earlier about being free. Free is what I felt when I finally got out of it. But it took so much time to kind of process it and then go to a spot where I could find myself without that job. And who was I? And you're exactly right. I found that the things about me that I think made me the best colleague, the best friend, the best wife, the best mother had been lost, had been silenced, and were gone. And so my kids say all the time, Mom, not for millions of dollars would we let you go back to that situation. Or I remember the first time after that when they said, it was just nice to hear me laugh again. Like it was me, it was Dana. I think as women though, and in general, not just with my particular circumstance, but so often for whatever it is, that role or to fit in or to climb, we sit back and we abide. And that's what I did. You know, I just kept quiet, stayed in my little corner, kept my head down, showed up every day. But when we do that, not only are we sending the wrong message to our children, let me be clear on that, right? We're untrue to ourselves. And to find a place where you can speak again, which I'm still in the process of kind of doing, is, like you said, so freeing, so powerful. And so I know what that experience is like. And I look to women like you and others who have had these same journeys. And I couldn't agree more about the misalignment of those two parts of our life that are equally important.
So first, I just want to say, I am so sorry that you had to go through that. I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. I'm proud of you for choosing your family. And that is not easy because so many of the messages we've been given, I think particularly as women, are we can figure anything out if I just work harder, if I just hold on a little longer. But to what end? And, you know, there's two things coming up for me. The first trip I took to Modern Elder Academy in January, and they are not a sponsor. I know I'm saying their name like they're writing me a check. No, I'm writing them checks.
I love it.
But it really did change my life. That first trip, when I looked at the calendar, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I can go. And then I realized it was the week of January 6th. And I realized my son Victor's 16th birthday was January 9th. And my first thought was, oh, I can't go. And then I was so sad. I went to Victor and I said, hey, Victor, we call him Rue is his nickname. He'll kill me for saying this in public. But I'm like, hey, Rue, there's this class that mommy wants to take about helping you figure out who I want to be and what I want to do next. And I really want to go, but I'd be gone on your birthday. I'll be back for your party, but I'd be gone on your birthday. What do you think? And he said, Mom, you've been so sad and you've worked so hard for so long. The best birthday present you could give me is being yourself again.
Wow.
And in that moment, I cried. I ugly cried. I was proud of this kid speaking such wisdom to me. And I was proud of myself for even asking the question, because for so much of my career, so much of my life, I would have dismissed it out of hand. Oh, well, I can't go. It's Victor's birthday. A good mom wouldn't miss her kid's birthday, particularly if I'm not working. I have no excuse to not be there. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Our kids see where we are. The second, and a lot of this goes to Victor, in this role, my last role, the company was in crisis. This is all public information. I don't have to go into details, but being chief marketing and communications officer, there's a lot of crises to manage. And it was at least once a week that I was working till 2, 3 in the morning. I'd come home and have dinner, but I'd be up in my office 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes pulling all-nighters. And I remember one night, it was right before the layoffs. It's 2:30 in the morning. I'm in my office and it's connected to the kitchen. And I hear someone getting water. And then I hear, Mom? And I said, yeah, baby. He's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm just doing some work. He said, it's 2:30 in the morning. Why are you working? Oh, don't worry about it. There's just something I had to get done. And then one of the gifts of COVID for our family is that if I'm in town, I have dinner with them every night. I don't care what's going on, right? I will come home. If I'm in an office, I'll come home from the office. If I'm working from home, I'll stop what I'm doing, have dinner with them. And every night we kind of go through the highlights and lowlights of our day. And we're walking through them, asking them how their day was. And Victor was ready. He said, so Mom, what was up with you working at 2:30 in the morning? How often do you do that? Why were you working that late? And I kind of gave, whatever, same old, same old. And then he looked at me with such deep wisdom and he goes, does the CEO work as hard as you do? And it stopped me in my tracks because my first inclination was to make an excuse and explain why it was okay, why I was working this much. And I just paused and I said, I know he works hard, but I can't answer your question. And you've given me a lot to think about. Thank you for asking me. And that question from Victor was the first, God nudge that I got that something had to change. Mm-hmm. And I really went through in this sabbatical and said, not only do I need to reclaim sleep, reclaim time, reclaim joy, I have to think about why I work the way I work. I will tell one more story. When I was in this retreat, they drew a graph of kind of how you find the state of flow. And it's kind of a 2x2 where the size of the challenge is on the vertical and your skill level is on the horizontal. And a state of flow can be found when your skill matches the level of challenge. Well, what I discovered is sometimes there's a third axis there. And I think particularly for women. At my last role, the challenge was large. I had the skill to meet it, but the circumstances, both industry, macroeconomic, and structurally, I, and in many ways the company, were not set up for success, regardless of how much effort was put in. I wish them all the luck in the world. I really hope that they can thrive. But when I thought about it, it didn't matter how hard I worked. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. The way things were set up, it was not going to work. And the way I'm wired and the way many high-achieving women are wired, we will sacrifice ourselves before we sacrifice the work because we think if I just try a little harder, if I just put in some more effort, I can fix this. I can make this work. And sometimes the answer is you can't, or you can, but at what cost to you?
That is so powerful. And I'm thinking about all of the different scenarios. It's funny you say flow because I just was watching Rory McIlroy talk about flow state after winning the Grand Slam and the Masters. Because again, when you're busy living your life, aren't stopping to think about how your brain is wired. And my husband, who is so calm, and it's like, you need to meditate and you need to do yoga and you do these things. I said, I can't sit still. I'm not wired that way, right? But sometimes that's what we have to do to be able to realize that some of these things are even happening to us. Because like you said, if you go through the motion and you just keep doing it, you don't know. And I think that's how 12 years passed, right? Or that's how a career passes. Because you stay, because you feel you don't have a choice. I do think a lot about, too, the power of women in this next phase of our lives when we are empty nesters, right? And have this opportunity to not feel that pull as much or the guilt about being at home. That story about getting up in the middle of the night is really haunting. And I do think there is such power in listening to our children and the things they see and feel. I wish the whole world would pay more attention, because they are going to save us, and they really are our future. So looking forward and looking ahead, what do you see in the industry of marketing? What does that future look like? And this next phase for you. So I know you're only halfway through, so I'm definitely going to touch base with you when you finish this sabbatical.
Yeah.
And obviously can't wait to follow your journey, but what do you see coming for the future, for yourself personally, and then maybe for the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I'll start with the industry. So it's interesting. Initially, I was very much a traditionalist, particularly when it came to marketing creative. I'd been in spaces where they're saying, how can we use AI to pump out more content or pump out creative with less expense? How can we replace a traditional external agency just working with internal resources and AI? And initially my thought was, well, we can't, because that's not how we do these things. And then my change management background kicked in and I said, all right, Sherice, I know this is what you're comfortable with, but every tool that's been developed, especially being in the tech industry for 10 years, all of the projects I worked out across Google and Facebook and in the blockchain industry, they did not exist when I started the job, much less when I started my career. We were making and marketing things that were brand new. I'll give the perfect example. When mobile payments started to come out, my first role at Google in 2014 was leading marketing for Google Wallet. And we initially thought that our market was anyone with an Android phone, because of course, if you have iOS, if you have an Apple device, you can pay with Apple Pay. But if you have an Android device, you're going to want to pay with Google Pay or Google Wallet. And we thought, oh, everyone will want this because it's easier. And then we looked at, after our launch campaign, and I promise I'll bring this back around, but after our launch campaign, we looked at the results and we found that fewer people were even making their first tap to pay with their phone than we expected. And it's probably funny for anyone to hear this today in 2025, because everybody pays for things with their phone. But in 2014,
say it a little louder for those people in government that still don't collect payment that way. This is where I'm standing on my soapbox yelling. Did you hear her? Say it again to all the government folks who want you to come in and pay a utility bill in person. Please, Sherice, help me out.
No, exactly. Everybody pays either online or with their phone. But in 2014, when Apple Pay launched, and so even though Google had been out before, we were amplifying our efforts, what we found is that there was fear. It was a change in behavior. People had paid with cash or credit cards for their entire lives, for as far back as we could remember in our lifetimes, in our parents' lifetimes, in our grandparents' lifetimes. So using something different, especially when it came to money, brought up fear. If you're driving with a friend and you're using Google Maps or Apple Maps and you go the wrong place, no one thinks you can't drive. They think there's a glitch in the program. Something was wrong with the map. No big deal. In 2014, if you were paying with your phone and it didn't work, there's shame associated because someone thought your payment method was declined. So we had to say, all right, we are smart traditional marketers, but we are changing human behavior here. So how do we change our messaging? How do we align our messaging to assuage those fears and get them to try something new? I think the same thing is happening for marketers in the world of artificial intelligence. Yes, we can still create things with big camera crews and on-site filming, and some of that beauty may be lost. But if you think about the power these tools can give us as marketers, as communicators, when used the right way, it can not only make our jobs easier, make our lives easier as marketers, we can get out so much more of our message. We can reach such a larger audience. It's really about taking the fundamentals of marketing and communication. What is the customer benefit of this product, of this service, of this program that I'm amplifying? And how do I communicate that clearly to my audience? The tools you use don't matter as much as the message you are sending. So
Exactly.
it's like we have to get back to brass tacks. Marketing is not about how we do it. It's what we do. So let's use these tools to help us do what we do better, faster, easier. The second thing I'll say is human touch will always matter. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all of these tools, Llama, all of these tools are getting better every day. But what makes the difference between a good campaign and a great campaign is the insight that human touch gives. So yes, a tool can pump out a program for you, can pump out a campaign, fast, cheap, easy with a great prompt. But I truly believe that you still need that human touch, that expertise of knowing your user, knowing the magic of your product and connecting the two, as Google always said. Lorraine Toohill, the CMO of Google. That is where the human expertise comes in. I'm also not a complete tech optimist because this is going to cost jobs. People who are very good at their jobs, some things are going to be taken over completely by artificial intelligence. I don't want to say which roles those are because I certainly can't know, and I don't want to cause, mass panic to anyone in those areas. But I would say it's more important now than ever to look at how you can build a portfolio of your skills. If you are purely a demand generation marketer, and you've used a single set of tools or just a couple of your favorite tools to really drive marketing pipeline, you want to think about, how can I expand my skill set? How can I become more of an integrated marketer, a full funnel marketer? If you are brand and creative, we still need brilliant brand and creative marketers, but I want you to really think about, what is the value I'm bringing? And if the value I'm bringing is just making this creative in a certain way, how can I shift my value proposition? How can I expand my skill set so that my unique contribution remains relevant as these tools expand?
I love that. This is what I was trying to do even in the government space, which I believe truly that government isn't an exception to how the world works and how you market. And now more than ever, people need to understand the importance of services that especially local governments provide, the reason your lights turn on and your toilets flush. But government focuses on the wrong thing. They don't think about putting the residents first. They don't think about designing services. They don't think about those critical messages. They don't think about meeting people where they are. But all of these principles that you talk about should be applied in the government space as well. And this is one of the main reasons I've been staying focused in that sector in my work, is because I see this missed opportunity of what citizens really want, and government kind of missing this mark in service delivery. And cities aren't even thinking about ChatGPT yet to provide services. And yet, that those are the tools that the residents want to be using when they interact with government. And so I hope, and my listeners are from all over, but it's something that I'm really passionate about as far as storytelling, which I know is something that's core of your work, and what you do is telling that story and getting it into the hands of people. And government does great work. It's not just all bloat like people might be making you believe, especially local government. But government does not do a great job of telling their story or talking about that work and getting it back in to the hands of the citizens so that they understand. And I think right now, where people are questioning education systems and government and democracy, that storytelling is critical. And so no matter the industry, this is exactly what you talked about and where we're going. And people like you at the helm who get this are our future.
Oh, thank you. There's a woman I'd love to introduce you to, a dear friend of mine from Google. Her name is Dr. Maya Shankar. She happens to have a podcast called A Slight Change of Plans, and she is a behavioral scientist. So she brings her work to Google, helping maximize advertising. But one of her earliest roles was the chief behavioral scientist for the Obama administration in the White House. And one of the jobs she did is exactly what you were talking about. How can we both better communicate services that are available to citizens and get them to take them on? So, for example, I'm not going to get the story right. She tells it much better than I do, but she talked about unemployment benefits. And you can talk about the words matter. So instead of calling someone a welfare recipient, you can call them a job seeker. Just that one change in language that highlights what's important to that person and who they really are drastically increase the uptake in terms of email or even direct mail communication for these mission critical services. So putting your customer, regardless of who that is, whether it's a business, an individual, a local citizen, a national citizen, putting their needs at the center and using language that highlights what they need and how they want to see themselves makes all the difference. And when you talked about local government and the services they provide, it really reminded me of Maya and the great work that she does and talks about on her podcast. Language matters.
Absolutely. One example I thought of was the city of Denver deployed a chat bot on their website. And the number one issue that came through that website was people that had food insecurity. They were either looking for food or shelter. And so in my mind, if these disproportionate populations can figure out how to use these tools, anyone can, right? At all levels of government or public officials, people running for office who really are having trouble getting words to resonate or using words that land. And I think we all know after the last election, with so much information and misinformation and so many different platforms and places like TikTok where people are spending their time more and more and getting their information there. What you say is so true. The people side, the human side, and the words matter. And so how can we take those tools and the stories that we know how to tell and have a meaningful impact? That's what this is really all about. And I know that that's where your work has centered too. And storytelling has always been such a huge part of my career. And what that looks like might not be and isn't what it was 20 years ago. We're used to being in disruptive industry where in my early days, I hired a camera person and a writer. And then all of a sudden I was holding the camera. And so that change is what makes this work so beautiful, right? And at the center of it all is still the people and the story and the words. And so I have just loved this conversation with you for so many reasons, personally, and also because you are someone I admire so deeply professionally. And you've just given me so much to think about, and I hope our listeners as well. And so what does future Sherice post-sabbatical look like a year from now? Tell me what that vision is.
Oh, that's such a great question. There are still lots of things that are uncertain, but what I can tell you is Sherice a year from now is fully aligned with her purpose. I will be whatever role I choose to take. It will be where my personal values align deeply and directly with my professional occupation. Future Sherice will be a writer, something that I've shrunk myself for a number of years. I love writing. I think I've been told I'm pretty good at it. I kind of like it. And I have not just a book, I have multiple books in me. But for years, I always thought, well, who are you to think you can teach someone this? Or how could you possibly do that? You're far too busy. Or who would care about what you have to say? What I'm learning is that while the response to my writing, response to my book would be fantastic, that's not the point for me. The point is I have a story to tell through a lifetime of experiences, personal, professional, spiritual, educational. And I am the only person on this planet that can tell that story. And so for that reason alone, I am worthy of telling it. So Sherice, a year from now, will have written a book. Might be crappy. It might not sell, but I will have written it because I have a story in me. And I've let the voices telling me that you're not worthy. Who do you think you are? Hold that book back for almost 10 years now. So I'll be in a job that aligns with my value. I will have a book. I will continue to be writing. And my hope is I can keep telling stories for the rest of my life, regardless of what that looks like. Entrepreneurial, in the public sector, in the private sector. Storytelling is what brings me to life. I believe it's my gift, and I will no longer shrink that light to make anyone else comfortable.
I love it. I love it. I can't wait to read your book. I adore you. You're so wonderful. Thank you for taking the time. And I just so appreciate you and can't wait to follow the rest of your journey.
Right back at you, Dana. This was a pleasure. I'm so excited for you in this next journey. You are going to be and are amazing.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Ojai Stories podcast. Please leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice and stay tuned for more episodes coming soon. And visit our website at ohaicommunications.com.